Hello and welcome to all of you joining our DocShifter information session today. And most welcome to our expert guest, which is Leigh Sandwell at Pfizer. On our chat here today about eCTD 4.0, where we will learn from firsthand real-life experience that Leigh had at Pfizer. So again, thank you very much for joining us, Leigh. Maybe a few practicalities from my end before we get started. We will have, or we should have, some time for question and answers at the end of this session. So please make sure you ask those in the Q&A box or in the section that is foreseen for that, and we will come back to those questions at the very end. So again, a warm welcome to Leigh Sandwell from Pfizer. Leigh, maybe just start up with a real practical question. We've seen timelines and we've seen moving timelines. Could you share with us the latest health authority timelines for the eCTD 4.0 implementation?
Great, thank you, Gert. Yeah, so this is the current timelines that you'd find if you go to the ICH website and go to the M8 group. You will be able to see these timelines there. As is typical, I have heard today that there is a change coming to some of these. So the bottom item, Australia, there is an expectation there that they're going to push their timelines slightly out. So we're not going to see the technical pilots starting at the end of this year. That's probably going to go into next year, and the voluntary acceptance is probably going to go into 2027. But we've already got movement on the health authorities side, moving towards eCTD version 4. So we have Japan, who have already implemented as optional, voluntary eCTD version 4. They accept already. They did their pilot back in 2021, so it's a while ago now. And the FDA, they did their pilot back in 2023, and they are now accepting eCTD version 4. So you can see the timelines are kind of moving. Everyone's moving towards doing technical pilots very soon, in the next year or so. And we're expecting each of the health authorities to move to that voluntary acceptance. And hopefully everyone will kind of be on the same page before we get the first mandatory health authority. But at the moment, Japan is looking like they're going to be mandating from the 1st of April next year. That's the timeline that we've heard from them. There are a few gaps. The items in yellow, obviously, we haven't got some timelines for Korea for their technical pilot yet, and some of the mandatory dates aren't set yet.
Okay. Thank you very much for those and giving us...
to mention, sorry,
Yes.
Gert, I should have mentioned. So the two pilots that took place for Japan and the US, that's where we've participated. We've participated in both of those pilots so far.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for sharing those with us. Before we dive into some of the nitty-gritty of your, let's say, experiences at Pfizer and doing the pilots, could you share with us what the key benefits are that eCTD 4.0 is providing to the industry or is giving to the industry?
Yeah, there's quite a number of benefits or improvements you will see with eCTD version 4. So I was involved in defining some of those requirements way back in, I think it was 2010. I think we started this process. So it's been a few years, but there are some improvements over the current 322 standard for eCTD. So rather than a schema for ICH or a DTD for ICH and then a regional DTD or schema, there's just one single schema that's going to be used going forward for eCTD version 4. So that means there won't be any regional updates to the DTDs, which will help us when it comes to the number of updates that we have to do for our solutions, hopefully. Hopefully it will reduce the number of updates, or at least make them easier and quicker to better make those updates in our solutions. There's a move to take out the table of contents from the technical standard and actually turn that into controlled vocabularies, or CVs that you'll be sometimes hear it's being called. So this is just a way that they can take out the structure from the technical standard and make it easier for the updates to be made. So it's just an update to the CV, the controlled vocabulary, to add in a new section or change a section, you just make a change to the control for vocabulary rather than having to go back and change the GTD or schema as we have to do today. So again, hopefully that will lead to some improvements to the way that the solutions are updated, getting them updated quicker. Context of use is a new terminology. So rather than the leaf that you have today in eCTD version 4, you have a context of use which defines where your documents are going to be used in your structure. And it contains information about the section or the controlled vocabulary section that's going to be identified, where that document should sit. It also includes information about the priority of that document. So I'll talk about priorities in a second. And enables you to just really define where that document sits. And then you can use another context of use to have the same document sit somewhere else in your structure. So you can reuse documents just by having an extra context of use in place. There's some life cycling improvements. So we've got rid of append. There is no append in eCTD version 4, which always caused some concerns and confusion about how the life cycle is managed, and if you started appending things, could you append to an append? And it was just very confusing. So append has gone, and there's been some improvements to the way the replace functionality is going to happen going forward. So today you can only do a like for like replacement, one document for one document. But going forward with eCTD version 4, you can do replacements with one document being replaced by many, and many being replaced by one, and also by one-to-one as well. So it will allow for more granular documents being produced. So you could have one document being replaced by many documents. If your authors decided they needed to start authoring something in a more granular fashion, you could still manage that process. And it also kind of works with branching of documents as well. So it enables you to kind of branch with your labeling information, hopefully managing that process a bit better. I mentioned about the priority order. So the priority order enables you to set the order of the documents and how they're going to be viewed by the reviewer in their review solution. So you can set the order that you'd like those to appear. So today we kind of are forced into an order that you apply them in your XML, but using the priority order, you can set the order and you can then reorder things as well later on. So you could add in a new document and put that in the middle of your existing order in a section, and sets a kind of a nice view for the reviewer and kind of order things in an appropriate manner for them. Node extensions, STF, that's all gone away and it's all been replaced with a harmonized approach. So again, trying to simplify things in terms of what was going on there with different approaches in different countries. There's a simplified folder structure, so you don't have as many folders to deal with as you do today. It's a really complex structure that we have in 3.2.2. It's going down to 5 levels, and so all of your Module 2 documents, for instance, would appear in an M2 folder. There is no subfolders under M2. Everything just appears in that one level. And that's because the review tools will be managing the way that the reviewers will see those documents. So there's no need to have any kind of structure to where those sit. They can all be managed by the context of use and be able to have the tool actually display things in an appropriate manner. The sequence numbers, we were running out of sequence numbers in some applicants because of ad promo submissions in the US. We were using quite a lot of sequences. So we've gone from the maximum of 9,999 going up to 999,999. So that should hopefully last us a few more years. Hopefully we won't reach that limit. There's some other minor improvements, moving from MD5 checksums to SHA-256, which is a more secure method. There's forward compatibility, so you can still connect to version 3.2.2 information and kind of reuse and replace that information going forward. And there's also the possibility to do two-way communication in version 4, but it's not actually being used by any of the health authorities yet. So the ability is there. Hopefully someone will utilize that in the future, but at the moment that's something that's not going to be used at this stage.
All right. Thank you very much for that complete overview there, Leigh. As you mentioned, there's quite a a number of changes coming in. I think quite a few that will be useful and time savers as well, moving forward. As a reminder, if you have questions, please ask them. People that maybe joined late, I see there's still more and more people coming in. We hope to have time for Q&A at the end of the session, but please drop them to us in the comment section. Moving forward to, I think, the meat of the conversation. You've been piloting, testing eCTD 4.0 for a while. Could you share what business impacts you've been considering seeing and how you've mitigated those within Pfizer?
Yeah, so the first thing I suppose is solutions. It's really important with eCTD version 4 that you have solutions to be able to build, publish, do your validation, be able to view your submissions and archive, because it's a more complex technical standard. The XML is not as easy to read as it is today with 3.2.2, so you do need to make sure that you have solutions in place. So it's important to start that discussion with your vendors and making sure they're getting prepared for eCTD version 4. The tools will take away the hard work of producing that XML for you, so you don't need to worry about it. And you should see those tools being very similar as they are today. They shouldn't look too different. It's still the eCTD structure that you're going to be working to. It's just the fact that it's a different output that's being produced. There's some more metadata that you need to consider. So we had to think about the business impacts to the process, how we're going to get that metadata, how we're going to manage that metadata to try and keep alignment and make sure we don't end up with a mess of metadata internally that would be difficult to manage. So we've got to think about that. There's obviously the life cycling changes I mentioned. So there are obviously the new ways of doing the life cycling with the many-to-one and one-to-many replacements. And your authors will need to understand those changes so that if they want to better utilize that method, that they can. And obviously having everyone trained up on what's new in eCTD version 4, just preparing for it. And the biggest thing that we did just to prepare us for the impacts was to actually do the piloting itself. That was the key thing. If we do pilots, then we can understand what the impacts will be by actually doing something and submitting something to the health authority.
All right. How did you prepare for piloting eCTD 4.0?
We always have a kickoff meeting with our stakeholders. So across our organization, making sure we bring in everybody that's going to be impacted by us potentially doing a pilot. And then we talk through, obviously, our company position on piloting. We want to be involved in pilots. We want to get that experience from doing pilots. But there's some things we have to take into consideration. It all depends on the circumstances of the pilot. Is this going to be a live submission that we're going to have to then manage going forward if we do this as a pilot? Or is this dummy files that we'll be submitting? Or is it something we've previously submitted and we're doing parallel? We consider all of those items. We think about, have we got the ability to pilot? Particularly with eCTD version 4, you need to obviously have those tools, as I mentioned. So you've got to make sure you've got the support from your vendor. And do we have the resources as well internally to be able to meet the needs of doing eCTD version 4? Do we have the expertise available to understand what needs to be done? And just the resources available, or we've got a lot of other work going on at the same time. So we've just got to be careful about that. We balance those advantages versus the disadvantages of being involved, and then we come to a decision and make sure that we document that decision before we proceed.
And concerning technical considerations, are there any technical considerations that you needed to consider prior to committing to the pilot?
Yeah, so I mentioned already, obviously, the solutions, having those in place. You don't need all of those solutions being ready, obviously, for piloting. You build and publish, you have to have that. That's a key. You've got to have something to better build and publish out your eCTD version 4. From a validation perspective, it really is beneficial if you've got a validator that can validate the eCTD version 4 standard. You could do it without. You could go and do a pilot without that, but you then have to do some manual QC of the XML, and the eCTD version 4 XML, as I mentioned, isn't the easiest to read and check. So you'd have to have some real experts in being able to look at that XML. So it's important that you have a validation tool, really. Viewing tool, you can get away without having a viewing tool. You could just use your build publish environment to be able to see what you're producing. In terms of the EC version 4, there is no style sheet, so you can't view the sequences, um, submission units, I should call them. It's the new name for those. Those can't be viewed in the browser, so you do need a tool to be able to view them. But as I say, for the pilot, you don't really need that. And also from an archiving perspective, if you're just technically piloting, you don't need to make sure your archive solution's ready. But obviously, important to have the other solutions in place. How you get access to those solutions? Are you going to have those solutions available to you in one of your non-production environments, so like a test environment or development environment, or is the vendor going to provide an environment to you that would be something that you could access through into like the cloud environment they'd set up for you that you can access? You also need to think about if the pilot is with dummy documents or previously submitted documents. Obviously, dummy documents is a little easier. If it's previously submitted documents, you've got to make sure that's available to the environment that you're going to be using, so that you can then pull those documents into the submission you're going to be building, into the pilot submission you're building. And can you meet the timelines for the pilot? So technically, sometimes it takes a bit of time to get these things set up. So we've just got to be careful that we are going to be able to meet the timelines that the health authority has set before we commit to doing it.
And yeah, a bundle of questions. Can you share with us how you feel or your thoughts about how the pilot went and outcomes from the pilot?
Yeah. So I can talk to very briefly about the Japan one. So for the Japan pilot, we actually used the health authority's solution. So it was just some of our colleagues local in Japan that got involved in that pilot. We didn't have a solution available, a global solution available for eCTD version 4. So we used that pilot and that to do the pilot. And it actually seemed to go well. But obviously the important thing is when we want to work on these these pilots, we want to do things globally. So when it came to the FDA technical pilot, we wanted to do that in a global solution. So we worked with our vendor and we got an early version of their solution. We were still successful, I believe, in what we did. So we were able to submit 3 submission units or sequences to the health authority and had no validation issues with the FDA. So that was a big positive at the end of it. But we did have to do a lot of work to get there. So some of the functionality wasn't there with this very, very early solution. So we had to do some work to kind of manually make sure that our XML was right before we submitted. So there were some adjustments we had to make just to make sure everything was good. It did take some time to get the environment set up and obviously make sure things were right. And if there were any issues, we needed to get those resolved. So those were kind of some of our learnings. And we were obviously able to give feedback on the solution back to the vendor, so make improvements to the solution, which I think again was another positive for being able to do this, getting prepared for what was going to happen in the future.
Most critical learnings, maybe? Is there anything you haven't touched upon yet? And it's one of the questions that came in as well yet.
Yeah,
I look at what are
I think the key thing was the metadata. Just knowing how the metadata was going to be managed in eCTD version 4, and we need to think about how we're going to do that in Pfizer. So it's going to be an important piece as we move forward. You have your own user-defined metadata, so it's it could become a big mess if you just leave that open to users to start defining everything they want to define. We want to have some control over that metadata going forward so that we can keep consistency of that metadata in our eCTD version 4 submissions and try and reuse metadata appropriately. So we don't end up with like one version with a capital at the beginning, one with a lowercase, that kind of thing can all, and like different spellings, those kind of things can kind of easily build up. So we want to try and make sure we're prepared for that.
all right. Thanks, Leigh. A couple of more questions, few more before we maybe look at some of the questions that came in. How has the pilot helped you in preparing for eCTD 4.0? What was the main thing for you?
Yeah, well, we always want to be a leader in our field, in the e-submissions field. So that's a key thing for Pfizer. And it's also about helping the health authority and making sure they're prepared on their side. but it gives us a comfort factor when we're doing these pilots that we know that we're going to be ready and compliant for the new standards that are coming forward. So we're going to be ready for when those standards have become mandatory, or when we're ready to start submitting in that new standard. We know we're going to be ready, and there's not going to be any major issues as we start doing them. It helped us think about the process as well, so making sure that we are ready from a business perspective, thinking about the replace operations and things that we need to raise to the authors and to the business teams, what's going to change in this new process, making sure people are prepared. It also enabled us to get some people trained up, so they had experience of eCTD version 4, so we got the expertise built up, the resources internally. Again, in preparation for when we go live, we're going to have those experts knowing what to do, and they can help us with implementation of the real thing when we go live. And really just making eCTD version 4 a not scary topic internally, because I think people hear about eCTD version 4, they hear about all the changes, and that can sound quite daunting, but when you've actually done it, then you can realize, okay, it's not too bad. There's obviously some things that you need to deal with, but it's not, I would say, a massive change really in the way that people work today.
All right, and next steps, what are your next steps in getting ready, being ready for eCTD 4.0?
Yeah, we're going to do more pilots. You'll be surprised to hear. So we've been working with our vendor on Japan and their eCTD version 4 standard, so that we are going to be prepared. Obviously, that mandatory date next year is concerning for us. If that goes ahead, the 1st of April, we want to be prepared for that. So we want to do a pilot with our solution, basically. So producing a Japan eCTD version 4 submission that's already been submitted to the health authority in Japan as a eCTD version 3.2.2. We'll do the same thing in version 4 and just make sure that it goes through their validation and that we don't have any issues. So kind of more of a real example pilot rather than just dummy files in the submission. And then we've already signed up to the EMA's pilot. So if you go to the EMA's website at the moment, they're looking for companies to sign up for their eCTD version 4 pilot. So we've signed up and plan to be involved in that pilot phase as well. It's important to get involved in all the different regions' requirements. They're not all the same. There are differences. Japan in particular is very different from others. So it's important that we get involved and we understand the differences before we go live.
Which leads us nicely into the first question that came in from the audience. Eddie asked, do you have any thoughts, Leigh, on the EU eCTD 4.0 pilot requiring real documents for the sandbox that everybody will be using? Is there?
Yeah, so it's led to us having to have a think about this internally. We want to be careful about what we select. Obviously, if it's dummy files, it's a lot easier. We can just put any old dummy files into submission. But if you're selecting something that's already been submitted, you need to be wary about what product you select. You don't want to be picking your most complex, trickiest submission to do in eCTD version 4. But we want to get that experience from doing it. So we're going to be looking for something obviously simpler, that we can still pull in and still get that experience from submitting in eCTD version 4. The EMA on a call yesterday did confirm that any documents that we submit into them would be treated in the same confidential manner that they would any live submission going to them. So there is that control still in place, even though this is a pilot.
Okay. Thank you. Next one we have from Alberto. Which publishing tool have you used during the pilot? If you can share that, may share that.
Yep, so we're using ENOV's Insight solution, previously called Calyx Insight, Liquid Insight. But yes, it's ENOV's solution that we're using today.
Okay.
And that's our plan for all of our submissions going forward. We're going to be testing those and piloting them using that solution.
All right, thanks for clarifying. Gareth is asking, are the validation tools accurate for eCTD 4.0 outputs? Because there were concerns around the lack of full rule sets in the validation criteria.
Yeah, so experience so far has been positive with the validation. We haven't had any kind of issues that we've noticed so far. I think we'll I think learn as we go along. I think there's obviously risks. When eCTD was introduced originally, there was a kind of gap between the vendors with their interpretation of the standards and people doing different things in different ways. And there was an initiative called ETICS, which actually tested the tools and tried to find out where there was differences in the way that things were being validated. Hopefully, with eCTD version 4, we've done a better job of identifying those rules and making sure that we're covering everything, so it's clear. But I suspect there's going to be something that's going to be different, something that's going to be dealt with in a slightly different way in one solution to another solution. So I think, yeah, we'll see from experience, but I'm hoping it's better experience than it was originally with version 3.2.2.
Okay, thank you. I have another one here from Shankar. What is the difference between document reuse and file reuse? Which situation requires document reuse and file reuse? When should that be used? That's something you can shed your light on, or?
Yeah, so I think I'm not too sure if there's a real difference here. So a document is um, the real file, basically. When I mentioned about the document earlier, I was talking about files and those physical files being stored somewhere. So it's kind of a reference to where that document file will be stored in that folder structure, that simplified folder structure that I talked about. And then your context of use will then take that document, that file, and define where that is being used, that priority number, etc. Any metadata around that document, that file, and where it's being utilized. So I think it's the same thing, the document and file, unless I'm mistaking this question.
Okay. Another question, anonymous question. Are there any tips for medical writers or impacts on templates that you've seen?
No, so you don't need to make any changes to what you're doing today in terms of authoring. You could make changes. Obviously, I talked about the change in the life cycling with the replace option, moving from one to many and many to one. So it gives you the option to change your granularity of your documents, but you don't have to. You can carry on authoring as you do today. There's no need to change the granularity of your documents if you don't want to. You carry on using your templates exactly as they are today. It still fits into the CTD. It still fits into the eCTD and eCTD version 4.0.
Yeah. Okay, clear. And maybe one last one, because we're hitting the bottom of the hour. Is the biggest challenge or you've faced in terms of metadata or document lifecycle operations? Broad question, but
Yeah. I don't know that we've had a massive challenge. I think I mentioned already about the metadata and the kind of management of it. I think is going to be a challenge for us. We haven't sort of hit that challenge yet because all we've done is pilots so far. But I think that would be where the biggest challenge is going to be, is kind of managing that metadata. How are we going to do that internally? What will we use to manage that metadata to ensure that we don't end up with lots of mess, basically, with different metadata being defined in different ways and it not being reused appropriately. We want to try and maximize the reuse of our metadata as much as possible.
all right. And with that, it's 5:30 here in Ghent, in Belgium. With that, Leigh, I want to really, really, really thank you on behalf of the entire DocShifter team and all the viewers online now and who will watch the recording for your valuable contribution. If in case you've missed part of it or you want to share it with somebody, as soon as this session finishes, as always, this the recording will be visible on and viewable on LinkedIn, so you can find it in our accelerating eCTD submissions newsletter on LinkedIn. That's where you'll find it, and you can share it from there. So again, First of all, thank you very much all for joining. We didn't answer all of the questions, but hopefully a great deal of them. Thank you again, Leigh, for the session. And yeah, we hope to see you on one of our next upcoming sessions. Greetings from Ghent. Thank you again, Leigh. Hope to see you all soon on next session. Take care and bye-bye. Bye-bye.